Unknown number. This is going to sound forward, but I still owe you a coffee that isn't charity. Dinner? Stacy. Rose stood very still in the marble lobby, thumb hovering over the screen. One woman's warning ringing in one ear, and another woman's warmth blooming, unbidden and unstoppable, straight through her chest. She typed back before she could talk herself out of it. Yes. The restaurant Stacy picked was small and dim and tucked 2 blocks off the noise of Midtown, the kind of place with candles and wine bottles and a menu that changed depending on the mood of the chef. She'd chosen it on purpose. Nothing about it screamed billionaire's world, and something in her had wanted, badly, to see Rose Kingsley outside the glass and marble that seemed to follow her everywhere. Rose arrived 7 minutes late, hair still perfectly braided, blazer traded for a soft green sweater that made her look 10 years younger and infinitely more like a person instead of a title. She slid into the booth across from Stacy and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since noon. Rough day?
Stacy asked.
Every day is a rough day when your boss is. Rose stopped herself, laughed.
Sorry.
That's not dinner conversation.
No, please.
I'm a reporter. Gossip is basically my love language. Rose's eyes flicked up at the word love, quick and involuntary, and Stacy, who noticed things for a living, noticed. She's not a bad person, Rose said carefully, after the wine arrived. Jessica. People think she is because she doesn't. She doesn't do warm. Doesn't do soft. But she built that company out of nothing after her father lost everything, and she did it by never letting anyone see a crack. I think somewhere along the way the crack hiding became the whole personality. You care about her. She's been the only stable thing in my life for 5 years. Rose turned her glass slowly by the stem. It's not what you think. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. Rose's smile was rueful, a little sad. You have a very loud face, Stacy Smith. Stacy laughed, really laughed, the kind that made the couple at the next table glance over, and something in Rose's chest loosened, warm and dangerous, at the sound of it. Can I ask you something? Stacy said, once the laughter faded, once the candle between them had burned low enough to throw shadows across the table. Why'd you say yes? To dinner. You could have ignored the text. Rose considered the question with the same care she gave everything, turning it over, examining the angles, before she answered honestly, which was rarer for her than people knew. Because I've spent 5 years being careful, she said. And you're the first thing in a long time that made me want to be reckless instead. Stacy's breath caught. Across the table, close enough now that she could see the candlelight caught gold in Rose's dark eyes, she reached out, slow, giving Rose every chance to pull away, and covered her hand. Rose didn't pull away. I got divorced 8 months ago, Stacy said quietly. I found out I can't have children, and my husband couldn't look at me afterward, let alone talk about it. I moved here with 2 suitcases and a headache from how tight I wore my hair because it was the only thing I could control. I built a whole new life out of spite and caffeine. And I promised myself I wasn't going to want anything or anyone for a long, long time. And now I bought a coffee back for the woman who bought me one and asked her to dinner 4 days later like an absolute coward who couldn't wait longer than that. Stacy's thumb moved, once, gently, over Rose's knuckles. I want you, Rose. I haven't wanted anything this much in years. I don't know what to do with that. Rose turned her hand over, so their palms met, fingers lacing slow and deliberate. Maybe, she said softly, you don't have to do anything with it tonight. Maybe you just let it exist. They walked out together 2 hours later, the city lights blurring gold against a navy sky, and at the corner where their paths would normally split, Rose stopped walking. I have a bad habit, she said, of overthinking every good thing that happens to me until I've talked myself out of it. So don't, Stacy murmured, close now, close enough that her breath ghosted warm against Rose's cheek. Just this once. Rose kissed her first. It wasn't hesitant. 5 years of careful control had apparently been building toward exactly this, and when it broke all at once, Rose's hand curling into the front of Stacy's coat, pulling her in like she'd been waiting to do this since a revolving door and a stolen apple. Stacy made a small sound against her mouth, surprise and relief tangled together, and kissed her back with a fierceness that surprised them both. Months of careful loneliness unraveling in the space of a single New York street corner, cabs rushing past, neither of them caring. When they finally broke apart, foreheads resting together, both a little breathless, Rose laughed, soft, disbelieving. "Well," she said, "that's going to complicate things." "Good," Stacy whispered. "I'm tired of easy." Neither of them noticed the black car idling half a block down, or the woman inside it. Blonde hair perfect even at this hour, hands folded very still in her lap, watching the scene with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing at all, except for the single muscle working, over and over, in her clenched jaw. Jessica Zuck did not confront people. She removed them. It was cleaner that way, no scenes, no shouting, no evidence anyone could point to later and say she cared. Look how much she cared. So when Rose walked into the office Monday morning, faintly glowing in a way 5 years of careful observation told Jessica had nothing to do with sleep, Jessica said nothing about the weekend at all. She simply handed Rose a folder. "Singapore trip's been moved up. You'll need to leave Thursday." Rose blinked. "Thursday? That's in 3 days. I thought that deal wasn't closing till next quarter." It closed faster than expected. Jessica did not look up from her monitor. "Congratulations. You'll get to see the Marina Bay properties firsthand." It should have felt like an honor. Instead, Rose stood there, folder in hand, and felt the unmistakable, cold shape of what this actually was. "How long?" 3 weeks. "Jessica. It's an incredible opportunity, Miss Kingsley." Jessica's voice was perfectly, unbearably level. "I'd have thought you'd be pleased."
You have reached this point. Please subscribe for more. Thank you.
Rose set the folder down on the desk, very deliberately, and waited until Jessica had no choice but to look up at her. "You saw us," Rose said quietly.
Didn't you?
"Saturday night." Something flickered across Jessica's face. There and gone so fast that anyone else would have missed it. But Rose had spent 5 years learning the terrain of that face like a map, and she recognized the flicker for exactly what it was. Hurt. Buried under ice so thick it barely showed, but hurt all the same. "I don't know what you're referring to," Jessica said. "You're sending me to Singapore for 3 weeks because you saw me kiss someone on a street corner." Rose's voice was gentle, but it didn't waver. "You could just say that. You could just say you didn't like it, instead of hiding behind a business trip." Jessica stood, abruptly, and walked to the window, putting the whole room between herself and the conversation, the way she always did when something threatened to actually land. "I built this company," she said, to the glass, to the skyline, to anything that wasn't Rose's face, by never letting anything get close enough to use against me. My father lost everything because he trusted the wrong people. I watched it happen. I was 14 years old, and I watched everything he built get taken apart by people who smiled at him first. Her reflection in the glass was pale, controlled, betrayed only by the tightness around her eyes. I don't know how to want something without also calculating how badly it will hurt when it's gone. So, you push it to Singapore instead. So, I protect what I have left." Jessica's voice cracked, just barely, just once. The first real crack Rose had heard in 5 years. "You are the only person who has ever told me the truth without wanting something for me in return, Rose. Do you understand what that means in my life? I have never," she stopped. Started again. "I don't know how to say, I don't want to lose that without sounding like I'm trying to own you. So I sent a folder instead. Because folders are safer than sentences." Rose crossed the room slowly and stood beside her at the window, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her, close enough that neither of them could pretend the distance was really about the glass. "I'm not yours to lose, Jessica," Rose said softly. "I was never yours to keep. You never asked. I'm asking now." Jessica finally turned to face her, and for the first time in 5 years her Winterlake eyes were not flat at all. They were wide open, unguarded, frightened in a way that made her look, suddenly, much younger than 31. "Don't go to her.
Stay.
Let me try. I know I don't know how. I know I'm terrible at this. But let me try." It should have been easy. Rose had wanted once, For Jessica to say exactly these words, had spent quiet nights over unfinished paperwork wondering what it would take to crack that ice, had told herself for years that if Jessica ever really asked, she'd say yes without hesitation. But that was before a revolving door, before an apple, before a street corner, and a kiss that had unraveled something in her chest she hadn't known was tied so tight. "I care about you," Rose said, and it was true, and it hurt precisely because it was true. "I think some part of me will always care about you. But you had 5 years, Jessica. 5 years to ask instead of order, to say instead of imply, to reach instead of retreat. And I understand why I do, but I can't build a life waiting for someone to finish being afraid." Jessica's jaw tightened. She looked, for one terrible moment, like she might actually cry, and then, just as quickly, the ice reassembled itself, plate by careful plate, until the CEO was back in place where the woman had been standing a moment before. "Take the trip," Rose said gently, "or don't. But send someone else to hand me the folder next time." She walked out of the office with her heart hammering and her eyes stinging, and did not look back, because she knew, with the particular clarity of someone who has just closed a door she'd been leaning on for 5 years, that looking back would undo every ounce of resolve it had taken to say what she'd just said. Stacy noticed the change before Rose said a word about it. The way she'd started noticing everything about Rose, small things, the specific rhythm of her laugh, the way she chewed the inside of her cheek when she was thinking too hard about something she didn't want to say out loud. They were curled together on Stacy's second-hand couch, a documentary neither of them was watching playing low on the TV, Rose's head resting against Stacy's shoulder, when Stacy finally asked, "You've been somewhere else all night."
Talk to me.
Rose was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, she told her, the folder, the window, the 5 years of careful silence finally breaking into something that looked almost like a confession. She left nothing out, not even the part that scared her most, that some old, loyal corner of her heart had ached, hearing Jessica finally say the words she'd waited years to hear. Stacy listened without interrupting, a professional habit and a personal one, born of a marriage where she'd learned the hard way what happened when nobody let anybody finish a sentence. When Rose finished, the room sat in a silence that felt, for the first time since they'd met, genuinely uncertain. "Do you want her?" Stacy asked finally. Quiet, not accusing. Just honest, because honest was the only thing she knew how to be anymore. "I don't know how to answer that without hurting you." "Answer it anyway." Stacy shifted so she could see Rose's face properly. "I've spent a year of my life with a man who wouldn't say what he actually felt, Rose. I left a whole marriage because silence was easier for him than truth. I am not going to build a second heartbreak out of the same material. So, tell me the truth. Whatever it is. I can carry it." Rose reached up, ran her thumb along the sharp line of Stacy's jaw, and searched her face for a long moment before she spoke. "I spent 5 years loving Jessica the way you love a locked door," she said slowly, wondering what was behind it, wanting, badly, to be the person who finally got let in. And for 1 second in that office, when she finally said the words some old, tired part of me wanted that so much it scared me. She exhaled. But wanting the idea of something for 5 years isn't the same as choosing the person standing in front of you right now. "You didn't make me wait, Stacy. You didn't make me guess. You asked me to dinner 4 days after almost breaking my nose, and told me the truth about your whole broken heart over candlelight, and kissed me like you actually meant it." "I did mean it. I know." Rose's smile was soft, certain, entirely unlike the careful, guarded expression she wore in every boardroom Stacy had ever seen her in. "That's why I'm choosing you. Not because Jessica isn't worth choosing, she is, in her own complicated way. But because you gave me something she never learned how to give me in 5 years. You let me in without making me fight for the door." Stacy's eyes stung, sudden and unexpected. "You're sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." The kiss that followed was different from the one on the street corner, slower, deeper, unhurried. A kiss with nowhere else to be. Rose's hands found the tie holding Stacy's ponytail, fingers pausing there, questioning. "Can I?" Stacy went very still. Nobody had asked her that in years, had thought to ask, had noticed the tightness meant something. She nodded, throat too tight for words, and felt Rose's fingers work gently at the tie until it slipped free, until black hair fell loose around her shoulders for the first time since a highway drive out of Ohio 8 months ago. "There she is," Rose murmured, tucking a loose strand behind Stacy's ear, voice full of something that felt dangerously close to reverence. "I've been wondering what you'd look like without the armor." "And beautiful." Rose kissed her again, softer this time. Terrifyingly beautiful. What followed was slow and unhurried, and entirely private, the kind of tenderness neither of them announced with words, communicated instead in the careful undoing of buttons, in murmured names between kisses, in the particular hush of two people finally letting themselves be seen. The city lights burned gold through Stacy's window long into the night, and when it was over they lay tangled together in the quiet dark, Rose's head resting over the steady beat of Stacy's heart, both of them smiling at nothing and everything at once. "I'm not scared anymore," Stacy whispered, into the dark, into Rose's hair. "For the first time in a year, I'm not scared." "Good," Rose murmured back, already half asleep, utterly unguarded. "Neither am I." 3 months later, Jessica Zuck stood at the same window she'd stood at the day she let Rose walk out of her office, watching the city glitter below like something she'd built and could never quite hold. She had not sent anyone else with folders since. She had, instead, done something far harder. She had sat alone, in the quiet of her enormous, empty apartment, and let herself actually feel the thing she'd spent 31 years avoiding, that some doors, once shut, do not reopen simply because you finally learn how to knock. It hurt. She let it hurt. That in itself was new. Rose had stayed on as her assistant, professional, warm in the careful way old friends manage to stay warm even after everything, because Jessica had asked, quietly, for one more chance to be someone worth keeping in Rose's life, even in this smaller shape. And, to Jessica's own surprise, it had been enough. Not everything, but enough. "You're doing the window thing again," came a voice from the doorway, not Rose's, not anymore. A new hire, dry-witted, unafraid of her the way Rose had once been unafraid of her, standing there with a coffee held out like an offering. "It's very broody billionaire of you. Very effective, honestly. Very intimidating." Jessica almost smiled. "Almost. Thank you, Ms. Okafor." "You're welcome, boss." The woman didn't leave immediately, lingering a beat too long, and Jessica, for the first time in longer than she could remember, did not immediately will her away. Perhaps, she thought, watching the sun sink gold behind glass towers that had cost her a father, a childhood, and very nearly a love she hadn't known how to hold, perhaps doors did not always need to reopen. Perhaps some of them simply taught you, at great cost, how to build better ones. Across the city, in an apartment with 2 coffee mugs permanently by the sink and a ponytail tie that lived, and used, in the back of a drawer, Stacy Smith woke to the smell of eggs burning slightly and Rose's laughter drifting in from the kitchen. "I promise I'll learn to cook eventually," Rose called out, poking her head around the doorway, braids loose from sleep, wearing one of Stacy's old college t-shirts. "Give me a year. Maybe 2. "I married someone who couldn't talk about his feelings," Stacy said, padding into the kitchen, wrapping her arms around Rose's waist from behind, chin hooked over her shoulder. "Burned eggs, I can survive." Rose turned in the circle of her arms, smiling the smile she'd once reserved for boardrooms and careful diplomacy, now given freely, easily, entirely without armor. "No regrets?" Rose asked softly. It wasn't really a question about the eggs. Stacy thought about a highway out of Ohio, a ponytail pulled too tight, a body the doctors had called complicated, a silence that had once nearly broken her. She thought about a revolving door, an apple, a street corner, a hand undoing a hair tie with the gentlest question she'd ever been asked. "None," she said, and kissed her, slow and certain, in the golden morning light of a life she had built entirely, fiercely, joyfully her own. "I finally have everything I was scared I'd never get to want." Outside, the city kept moving the way it always did, indifferent, glittering, endless, and inside, two women who had found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose stood wrapped around one another in a kitchen that smelled like burnt eggs and something that finally, after everything, felt like home.